Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Welcome back to Lean Blog Interviews. This is Mark Graban. 20 years ago today, it was July 16th, 2006, this show started with a single conversation, episode 1, with my friend and mentor, Norman Bodek. What you're about to hear are some highlights from that very first episode, revisited here for the 20th birthday or anniversary. Since then, this podcast has grown to 547 episodes, pretty reliably 26 a year, about every other week on average. This podcast was completely Norman's idea. He said we should do a radio interview. And I said, Norman, I don't have a radio show or a radio station. Podcasting was new. I took his gift of an idea and tweaked it. And I think that's what Kaizen is all about. Instead of saying, no, I can't do that, it was a matter of figuring out, Norman, I'll figure out a way. Norman passed away in late 2020. I think about him often, his generosity, his curiosity, his belief that everyone, not just people in management, everyone has good ideas worth listening to and putting into practice. One more thing before we dive in, kind of looking back at the technology of the time. The audio quality back then was, let's say, rough and a work in progress. Norman was calling in via Skype over a phone line, but he was the first person who ever told me about, at the time, this new thing called Zoom. And for a good while afterward, that's how I recorded every episode. So please bear with the sound quality. Kind of sounds like AM radio quality. It's part of the charm, maybe, of where this all began. So here's a look back at where it started. Thank you always, Norm. To hear the full original conversation, you can go to leanblog.org/1.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you very much for doing this with me. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk a lot of management issues. Hopefully this will stimulate a lot of people out there to focus more on continuous improvement. And our first one, we're going to talk about the quick and easy Kaizen, what this means, why it's so important, and why I think it's the heart of the Toyota production system.
Well, I was hoping we could start off first. We talk a little bit about the background of Quick and Easy Kaizen. First, that's the title of one of your books, of course. Tell us, how you discovered that approach, how that might be different than what other people think of, with Kaizen or Kaizen events.
Yes, they are distinctly different. It's a shame that Bob Hall and I don't know who the other person was changed the name. Originally, it was called 5 Days and One Night. I met Ono's two chief assistants, Iwata and Nikao. They told me they were leaving Toyota and they wanted to come to America to teach as consultants. I said, fine, I'll bring you over and I'll run events for you. And I did. I brought them over and they ran these events called 5 Days and One Night. And then Bob Hall changed the name to Kaizen, to the Kaizen Blitz. And it's not appropriate because Kaizen really is small, incremental improvements.
Right.
That's what Kaizen is. Kaizen is change. Kaizen is small, continuous improvement. Kaizen Blitz is really kaikaku, which is the name of my other book. Kaikaku means radical change, and that's what a
right.
Kaizen Blitz is, a radical change. What Kaizen is, as I said, is small, incremental improvements, getting everyone in the company involved. The suggestion system, I credit it to Kodak and back in 1898, and the first suggestion was clean the windows. It's a wonderful idea. And the purpose of a suggestion system was to get ideas, to get all the employees involved, to empower people, to help them participate in a direct way in the organization.
Getting more ideas from employees sounds good until the manager imagines that every one of those ideas has to travel through management. Norman told a story about one leader who did the math and immediately saw a problem.
Astronomical when companies think of this. How can I manage those kinds of ideas? In fact, I gave a lecture out here to a company in Oregon. And the manager had 900 people in the plant. And I said, in Japan, they get 2 ideas per month per employee. And he said, no, but I have 900 people. I can't manage 1,800 ideas. And he wouldn't go forward. It was so silly because you don't manage it. People manage it themselves. People come up with an idea, and they do it themselves. Now, a lot of people do come up with ideas, and they implement it. But the beautiful part of this system, in that it is a system, it's a process to stimulate and encourage everybody to participate in change, to use their creative ability. You know, most people have such boring dead-end jobs in factories, and most people just hate to come to work. When I ask the question to audiences, what day of the week you like, you know, almost everybody says Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. It never really happens that somebody says, I love Monday or Tuesday. They don't like work, and yet most of your life is spent at work. And the reason is because they don't have a creative opportunity at work.
Norman's argument was not that small ideas merely make people feel more involved. Small ideas can also produce significant, measurable results, especially when other employees are encouraged to copy them. This story from Gulfstream was one of his favorite examples.
Well, I ran a 2-day course with them, and now they're up to 1,000 a month. So they're getting one idea per employee per month. I'll give you one idea, just one idea. What they do at Gulfstream is they do the wire harnessing. That means they have people, predominantly women, that are wiring the inside of an airplane. Mm-hmm. And it took these 2 women 7 days to do their part of the wiring, to do this one harness. 7 days to do it. And then they spend 4 hours to check it out. The way they check it out, they got to bend down under the panel. Visualize the panel is the size of an airplane wing. So they have to bend down under the panel, and they pull out these plugs, about 50 plugs. They take a plug and they connect it to the panel to check out that their wiring was correct. So it took them 4 hours every 7 days to do that. Well, after my course, and asking the people to make their work easier, one woman came up with the idea, instead of bending down, why can't we take all the plugs and connect them to the top of the panel? So they did. They put all the plugs to the top of the panel. Now they just pull them very easily from the top and make the correct connections. Instead of spending 4 hours, they do it in 1 hour. So 2 women save 3 hours a week times 2, that's 6 hours. 40 airplanes in a year, right? They're saving 240 hours from that one little idea. Now, there are 40 panels in that plant. That means there are 80 other people. So if you multiply 40 times 240, you get about 9,000 hours that is saved. Because we encourage people to copy each other.
Many traditional suggestion systems made employees submit forms, wait for committees, and hope someone eventually approved their idea. Norman believed the process should be much simpler and grounded in trust.
But if I'm going to put a piece of Velcro on a little, a little clicker, I don't have to ask my boss's permission. You see, the heart of the Toyota system is as follows. There are 2 things that's made Toyota successful, just 2 pillars. One pillar is lean, the elimination of waste. The second pillar is called respect for people. Respect for people, which means you trust people. So if you set up a system like this, you trust people that they're going to do things right for the company. And if they don't, they're going to learn just the way everybody else learns. You know, the Toyota system, which I like very much, is the managers are taught not to tell, but to ask.
Norman could be very candid about his own mistakes as a leader. He admitted that when he owned a company, he assumed being the boss meant having the answers. Toyota, he said, taught managers a very different habit.
I owned a company called Productivity, and I had about 127 people, and I never asked. I never asked anybody. I was the boss. I must have been the smartest because I owned the company. That was my attitude. I never asked. I just told.
Norman, of course, admired Toyota, but he never treated the company as infallible. Here's a funny example of an incentive that worked exactly as designed and not at all as intended.
Toyota encouraged very small ideas. At first, I don't think they gave any money. Then a little money. Then they made a mistake. Somebody said, let's give $20 an idea. So they gave $20 an idea, and a couple of people got very clever. They said one man was so clever that he got himself a swimming pool for the summer on $20 an idea. Because if I shuffled a piece of paper from one side, the desk to the other side, and I said, that's an idea, then that got $20. And so one of the senior managers, I don't know who it was, it might have been Mr. Cho or whoever was in charge up here, said, that's crazy. We're not going to do that anymore. And so what they did, which happens, it's the old saying is you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. So you don't get rid of a good system because you made a mistake with the $20 an idea. I would have just done very simply and said, I'd only give $20 if it's worth $20. It was so simple. It's worth 20, give 20. If it's not worth 20, then just pat them on the back, thank them for the idea, and put the idea into a hat. Because at the end of the month, maybe you'll have a drawing and give away 2 tickets for dinner somewhere.
Leaders often say they want people to speak up and contribute ideas, but employees pay much more attention to what happens after they do. Sometimes one careless response is enough to shut the whole thing down.
The role of the supervisor, they have to be very careful not to criticize. I was teaching one company, and one of the first ideas that was submitted, this woman goes to her boss and shows her the idea, because we're telling everybody, we want you to come up with at least 2 ideas per month. Most companies now, I tell them I want to see 1 idea per week. I want you to come up with 50 ideas, and you can do it very easy. I mean, I have people that are coming up with an idea a day, like in Gulfstream. Oscar Ortez, he comes up with at least 1 idea every single day, implemented idea every single day. And so there's one worker brings this idea to the worker, the supervisor. The supervisor looks at it and says, that's not exactly what we mean. And so the worker walks out of the room, and what do you think the worker says to their fellow worker?
Well, I'm sure they're discouraged, and that might be the last thing they suggest.
Absolutely, you're right, Mark. Yeah. They said, I'll never give them another idea.
Norman spent decades trying to convince leaders that the knowledge and creativity they needed were already inside their organizations. His closing challenge from 20 years ago sounds just as relevant today.
Well, the funny thing is, this is so simple to do. I don't know why. I'm working on this now. I'm working on a new book, trying to understand why we don't adapt this. Why don't we do simple things like this? Technicolor claimed they saved $8 million last year. That's 3rd year running. So in 3 years, they saved $24 million from these ideas from their employees. The average in Japan is $4,000 per employee per year. Arvin Meritor, this is an automotive parts company in Michigan. They also claim that they're getting about $4,000 a year savings per employee. Why aren't other companies doing it? We're running to China, right, to save money, and we can save a fortune by just asking our people to help.
I'd say Norman's influence continues through the people he taught, including myself, the books he wrote and published, and the ideas he helped bring to a much wider audience. I remain incredibly grateful that he encouraged me to start this podcast and that he agreed to become its first guest, and he was here many, many times. So if you want to hear the full episode 1, go to leanblog.org/1. As always, this has been Mark Graban. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.